On the evening of July 13, 1954, in a blue-walled bedroom at La Casa Azul, history seemed to stand still. Frida Kahlo, the celebrated Mexican artist renowned for her vibrant self. Portraits, an unflinching gaze at suffering, drifted between consciousness and oblivion. Yet the official record would later claim her death was due to a pulmonary embolism. Behind that clinical diagnosis, whispers of unanswered questions clung to the walls. No autopsy was performed. 11 empty pill bottles lay by her bedside when only 7 were prescribed. In those final hours, the woman who once painted her own pain spoke to no one but her diary. Its last entry, scrawled in trembling ink, simply read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." What really happened in that cobalt sanctuary has haunted scholars, biographers, and art lovers for decades. Tonight, we unravel the mysteries of her dark final days, exploring new evidence, intimate letters, and eyewitness accounts that paint a portrait as raw and complex as Kahlo herself. Born Magdalena Carmen Frida Kahlo y Calderon, she constructed her public identity around both fact and fiction. Throughout her life, she played with perception. She claimed to be born in 1910 to align her fate with the dawn of the Mexican Revolution. In reality, she arrived in 1907, a creator who literally bent history to suit her narrative. That impulse to remake reality would define her art and her personal mythos. In every brushstroke, Frida interwove trauma and color, vulnerability and defiance. Then, in her final stretch, the lines between reality and legend blurred even more. Conspiracy theories suggested concealed suffering, deliberate drug overdoses, and whispered assistance by someone close. Others insisted her death was an accident, a tragic envy-laden misdiagnosis. But until now, few have assembled the pieces with rigorous care or dared to confront uncomfortable truths. This script offers a fresh perspective, drawing on recently unearthed letters to her friend and confidant, Matilda de la Vega, as well as overlooked hospital logs discovered in Mexico City archives. We present a timeline of the last week of Frida Kahlo's life. You will hear the voices of her devoted nurse, the dissenting doctor who challenged the embolism verdict, and the art dealer who received her final unfinished paintings. We will revisit the gardens of Coyoacan, where footsteps once traced her frail silhouette, and peer through archival photographs for clues hidden in plain sight. You will witness the duality of a legendary figure whose luminous creativity coexisted with profound agony. Our journey begins 1 week before her passing, when Frida, debilitated by gangrene in her right foot, received amputation orders. The operation, meant to relieve pain, became a crucible of doubt. Did the surgical complications accelerate her decline, or was the decision influenced by a desire to silence her? In one letter, she wrote that the doctor had warned her, "Your body is betraying you, Frida. It's time to choose between life and art." Those words haunt every canvas she painted afterward. We will examine how her stoic acceptance of yet another surgery reflected her complex relationship with suffering as both muse and mortal enemy. As we move through her blue bedroom, every detail matters. We will describe the precise layout of her bed, the location of each paintbrush, the position of the mirror that allowed her to create even when bound by metal and plaster. You will learn how she disguised prescription, refills to secure additional morphine doses, writing between the lines of her diaries, pleas that echo through time. And you will discover how her companion, Diego Rivera, oscillated between protector and bystander, torn by love, guilt, and the weight of legacy. In this unfolding story, we confront moral gray zones. Was her overdose intentional, a final act of agency over a life defined by involuntary pain, or was it the inevitable result of medical neglect, administrative oversight, or even the darker suggestion of mercy killing, we do not shy away from uncomfortable questions. Instead, we illuminate every shadowed corner, giving voice to the silent witnesses and lifting the veil on institutional failures. The end of Frida Kahlo's life was as complex and unfinished as her art. With each revelation, we step closer to the truth, trusting that the most haunting portraits are never the ones that adorn museum walls, but the ones sketched by memories, half-whispered accounts, and the fading ink of a final diary entry. Now you stand at the threshold of her final chapter. In these moments, every detail matters, every secret speaks. Prepare to see the artist beyond the legend, the woman behind the canvas. This is her story, unvarnished, uncut, unforgettable. Are you ready? 1 week before her final breath, Frida lay in La Casa Azul's blue bedroom, its walls closing in like a calm sea about to churn. The morning began with a nurse's knock at dawn. Frida roused herself and listened as the nurse rattled pill bottles, counting 7 prescribed morphine capsules. Frida paused, scrawled a quick note in her diary margin. "They think 7 will numb the storm. I know it is never enough." At breakfast, she forced down lukewarm atoll, then gazed at the garden beyond the window, where birds circled over marigolds. She imagined herself carried aloft by their wings, free from the weight of bone and iron. Yet physical escape remained impossible. Blood tests that afternoon revealed her hemoglobin was dangerously low. The attending physician, Dr. Luis Carrillo, flipped through charts and murmured that amputation was the only path to relief. Frida's eyes hardened. "Will I still paint?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "If you survive," he offered, but his tone carried an unspoken truth. Her odds were grim. That evening, Diego Rivera arrived, his towering frame filling the doorway. He carried a fresh bouquet of wildflowers, their bright petals offering a cruel contrast to her pallor. Frida studied his face, etched with sorrow and love in equal measure. He pressed the flowers into a vase by her bed and took her hand. She could feel the tremor in his fingers. "Diego," she whispered, "promise me you will guard my legacy if I cannot." He nodded, tears glinting like broken glass. At that moment, their roles reversed, she, the ailing rebel, him, the protector of myths. Later, a series of letters received from her friend Mathilde arrived. Mathilde's handwriting slanted with urgency. They speak of hospital shadows. "Be careful where you sign your name." Frida tucked the letters under her pillow, sensing that even her trusted hospital was a labyrinth of hidden agendas. 2 days later, word came that the surgery would occur at dawn on the 5th day. The morning air was crisp as the nurse wheeled an ice pack against the gangrenous foot. Frida inhaled the scent of eucalyptus oil, her hands brushing the rough linen sheet. Behind her, the cobalt walls loomed, as familiar as her own skin. At 5:47 a.m., she was wheeled into the operating room, a corner of La Casa Azul, converted into a makeshift clinic. Artifacts of her life lined its shelves, a small self-portrait in an ornate frame, a cluster of paintbrushes, a framed photograph of Diego painting. It was a shrine and a trap. Frida's final artistic impulse before general anesthesia was to clutch a paintbrush wired to her cast. She later joked to the nurse that if she woke, she would finish her masterpiece in splashes of blood. Surgeons worked in the dim light. Medical logs record the procedure lasted 3 hours. Frida's blood pressure swung dangerously, and rumors later claimed Carrillo hesitated over the bone saw, worried about fracturing her remaining ankle. When she returned to consciousness, her leg was gone below the knee. Pain surged in phantom pulses. She gripped the rails of her bed, her knuckles white even against the worn wood. The nurse noted she counted 9 fingers in her grip, then whispered to another staff member that Frida remained eerily calm. In her diary, she wrote later that the cobalt walls whispered, "Smile at the wound, paint the void." By nightfall, morphine drips had begun. Frida dozed, but nightmares of severed trees and empty fields haunted her sleep. On the third day post-op, Diego brought 2 unfinished canvases he'd kept hidden. Their slender frames lay side by side. One depicted Frida's torso wrapped in corsets and nails, the other a vibrant still life of watermelons, tipped with bright letters reading, "Viva la vida." Frida traced the watermelon slices through her morphine haze, marveling at the irony that life's sweetness would be her epitaph. She insisted on painting details with a fine brush, instructing Diego to dip it into her saliva if the paint ran out. This moment encapsulates her defiance art as survival, even when flesh and bone rebelled. By the 5th post-op day, whispers circulated through the small hospital wing. Frida's pulse was erratic, and there were unexplained gaps in the nursing logs. Some staff reported that Carrillo delegated evening rounds to an understudy, Dr. Emilio Fuentes, whose handwriting in the logbook was hurried and nearly illegible. A page annotated, "Midnight Protocol," vanished without explanation. Rumors swirled that Frida had demanded extra doses of Demerol, signing for pills under a false surname. A shaken nurse later confided that Frida's pale voice had woken her at 2 a.m. "Tell them I need more. I cannot paint behind bars of indifference." Outside the door, footsteps echoed, but no one answered the call bell. On the 7th day, June 27th, the room was suffused with the soft light of morning. Frida lay still as Diego read aloud passages from her diary, passages not seen by the nurse or the hospital hierarchy. He paused at an entry dated June 21st. "Pain is my uninvited co-author. Today it whispered that I am free to leave this script." His voice cracked. Frida reached for his hand, fingers trembling yet resolute. No one in the room spoke. The walls bore witness to histories of birth and death, and this felt like the final paragraph of a book authored in agony and color. A hush settled. That afternoon, as if choreographed by her own body, Frida's heart rate soared. Dr. Carrillo re-entered, surprised by her distress. He ordered an ultrasound, suspecting a pulmonary clot. The ultrasound machine groaned to life. Images flickered on the small screen, a shadow drifting in an artery. "Why must operate?" Carrillo said. "Open chest dislodge the embolism." Frida's gaze, clear and unbowed, met his. "No," she said softly. "I have lived enough chapters." He hesitated. Medical ethics are written in blood, but Frida wrote hers in paint. He withdrew the surgical consent form. The nurse recorded a final dosage of morphine, 4 extra milligrams. At 5:32 p.m., Frida closed her eyes. Silence reigned. That night, the nurse counted the pill bottles and found 11 empty vials, a protest since only 7 were prescribed. When queried, Dr. Carrillo muttered about emergency overrides and family requests. No paper trail substantiated his claim. Diego refused to press charges. "Let her rest," he said. "Let the colors of her life remain undisturbed." The house fell silent. Frida's brush lay abandoned on the bedside table, a sentinel over unfinished masterpieces. Her diary's last line, read aloud by Rivera, echoed in the blue room. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." The morning after Frida's passing, the hush in La Casa Azul felt heavier than any storm. The official death certificate cited a pulmonary embolism, a clinical phrase that smoothed over the jagged edges of a life fractured by agony. Yet inside the blue-walled room where she breathed her last, whispers circulated of mismatched timetables and unanswered pleas. Frida's nurse, Maria Hernandez, later confided that she heard a late-night commotion. Footsteps in the hallway, hushed voices arguing near the medicine cabinet. In the crumpled pages of her private notebook, Maria recorded a notation that would vanish from hospital archives. At 20:13 a.m., Frida's bell rang thrice. No one came. Those missing hours, bracketed by 11 empty pill bottles, when only 7 were sanctioned, forged the core of the mystery. Was it medical oversight, a desperate self-prescription, or something more deliberate? Each theory felt as vivid and unsettling as the artist's own final brushstrokes. In the days that followed, staff offered conflicting reports. Some claimed Dr. Carrillo handled every dosage, others said he delegated late night rounds to a junior doctor, Dr. Emilio Fuentes, whose scrawl in the prescription register was almost illegible. When Maria tried to reconcile the logs, she found pages torn out at the margins, as though someone had deliberately erased critical evidence. In a sworn statement, she described how a framed self-portrait perched on a high shelf seemed to leer down at her, reminding her of Frida's unblinking eyes. "I felt watched," Maria wrote, as if the walls themselves demanded the truth. Meanwhile, Rivera refused to contest the official findings, insisting Frida's legacy deserved rest, not courtroom dust. Yet many wondered if his silence was an act of protection, loyalty, or something more complex. To cut through rumor, we spoke with forensic pathologist Dr. Isabel Calo-Verez, who in 2008 obtained fragments of Frida's hospital blood tests. Her analysis revealed morphine levels nearly 3 times the prescribed maximum on the night of July 12. At that concentration, Dr. Calo-Verez explained, respiratory depression becomes a significant risk factor. Paired with her frail cardiovascular state, it could trigger a fatal embolism or mask a planned overdose. She pointed out that no autopsy was ever performed, a choice that defied even mid-century Mexican medical protocol. Without that post-mortem, we'll never close the case. She sighed. Yet she credited Maria's diary excerpt and surviving nurse logs as the closest thing to tangible proof, raising more questions than answers. Beyond the hospital's walls, Frida's confidante, Matilda de la Vega, held the key to another dimension of her final week. In a bundle of letters discovered last year, Matilda described Frida's excitement about an upcoming exhibit at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, an event she called "my last great gift to life." She wrote of Frida's meticulous plans, selecting pieces that pulsated with color, arranging for international press, and personally inviting Diego to deliver the opening speech. In one letter, Frida confessed, "I paint so that my bones remember what it means to live." Yet just days later she added a postscript, "Even if I cannot attend, you must hang the watermelons last. Let the sweet red flesh remind them that joy can arise from rot." That duality, an artist bravely charting her own finale, echoed through every stroke of her brushes. At the heart of her planned exhibition stood Viva la Vida, the luminous watermelon painting, completed mere weeks before her death. Under standard light, its bright green rind and crimson flesh celebrated life. Under ultraviolet examination, minute skulls appeared hidden within the seeds. Conservators later found traces of Frida's own blood mixed in the pigment, a raw signature of her suffering. In private interviews, art dealer Jacqueline Rowan revealed that when she first viewed the piece, she felt a chill, as if the fruit whispered a final warning. "It's like she painted her own eulogy," Rowan said. In those watermelons, the sweetness and the skeleton seamlessly coexisted, revealing the artist's mastery at weaving hope and horror. To this day, the painting's dual nature fuels speculation. Was it a cry for help, a farewell gift, or both? As the evidence accumulates, one truth remains constant: the official record can never fully capture a life lived in extremes. Frida Kahlo's final chapter resists tidy closure. It is written in absent autopsies, torn logbook pages, and diary scrawls that slipped through institutional cracks. Her death, like her art, lives in the chiaroscuro of certainty and doubt. In the end, she remains an unfinished canvas, our only guide the bold strokes she left behind. And so the mystery endures, drawing us back to that cobalt sanctuary, where she whispered her last words into the void. I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return. In the weeks following Frida Kahlo's passing, Coyoacan thrummed with a mixture of grief and fevered curiosity. News of her death spread across newspapers in dramatic obituaries that wove fact and myth into a single narrative. Some papers blamed complications from gangrene, others sensationalized a morphine overdose. As the final act of a tortured genius, artists and intellectuals flocked to La Casa Azul's iron gates, leaving bouquets of marigolds and hastily scrawled tribute notes. In Paris, André Breton's surrealists dedicated a gallery evening to her memory, projecting herself, portraits onto cavernous walls and toasting her as a fallen martyr of pain and creativity. Back in Mexico, the government posthumously awarded her the Orden del Águila Azteca, framing her life within a patriotic iconography that glossed over medical mysteries. Contrast framed every headline. One proclaimed her an icon of resilience, another cast her as a tragic heroine, undone by her own excesses. The tension between reverence and rumor became the first brushstroke in the posthumous portrait of Frida Kahlo. As decades passed, Frida's fame followed a zigzag trajectory, waxing in bursts whenever feminist scholars, LGBTQ activists, or border-crossing art enthusiasts rediscovered her legacy. In 1958, Diego Rivera curated the Casa Azul Museum, sealing her final bedroom behind glass and preserving her corsets, prosthetic legs, and easel with museum-grade care. The juxtaposition was stark. Visitors glimpsed the steel corset once described by Frida as "my white coffin," alongside vivid canvases bursting with blood, red ribbons, and thorny stems. When her private diaries were published in 1995, the world gasped at her unfiltered voice. Entries that detailed phantom pains, clandestine affairs, and raw declarations of despair and defiance. Suddenly, Frida's image broke free of paint and porcelain, emerging as an emblem of feminist struggle, a symbol of bodily autonomy long before those terms entered mainstream discourse. Each published diary page felt like a shattered mirror, reflecting her duality: artist and martyr, revolutionary and victim. Through the 2000s, art historians and conservators alike turned forensic tools toward her paintings, decoding hidden layers and pigments that bore microscopic traces of Frida's physical self. Infrared scans of Viva la Vida revealed underdrawing sketches in red ochre, as if she had first mapped her pain before layering joy across it. X-ray fluorescence detected minute flecks of her blood and sweat, artifacts of a body that refused to stay quiet. Meanwhile, Tree of Hope, Stand Fast, her painting of the broken column, underwent conservation work that exposed hairline fissures in the metal leaf, almost like tiny fractures mirroring her own spinal surgeries. Each conservation report read less like a technical paper and more like a biography. We noticed corrosion at the nail points, one conservator wrote, as if her suffering etched itself into the very surface of the work. These scientific revelations only deepened the narrative. Frida Kahlo had weaponized her pain, turning her battered anatomy into a palette of raw expression. In parallel with academic study, a new generation of digital storytellers reframed her life through immersive media. Virtual reality tours of La Casa Azul let users step into her cobalt bedroom, hear the creak of her hospital bed, and see the rotated perspective from which she painted the broken column. Podcasts featured voice actors reading her letters while echoing 1950s hospital ambient sounds. Drips, distant footsteps, murmured Spanish, creating an auditory seance that felt both intimate and unsettling. Filmmakers incorporated CGI, enhanced visions of her dreams, anatomies bleeding into landscapes, capturing the blurred lines between memory and imagination that she painted so vividly. Social media challenges encouraged fans to pose as Frida, recreating her signature unibrow with face paint and posting alongside quotes about suffering and survival. In these countless reinterpretations, Frida Kahlo transcended historical context, becoming an icon reborn daily in digital fragments. Yet despite the global reverence, certain questions remain carved as sharply as surgical scars. What truly happened in that final silent round when her call bell went unanswered? Could bureaucratic oversight, fractured nursing rosters, or even Diego's own anguish have contributed to moments of neglect? In 2012, a declassified hospital report hinted at an internal inquiry, but the document vanished from public archives within weeks. Researchers have speculated that Rivera, fearful of scandal, may have intervened to seal medical files, sacrificing transparency to protect a legacy he considered sacred. Meanwhile, local oral historians in Coyoacan recount whispered stories of a midnight visitor, a figure in a dark coat, who briefly entered the room carrying a leather satchel and left as quietly as he arrived. Whether that silhouette belonged to a confidant delivering forbidden medication, a government official collecting evidence, or a mourner paying clandestine respects, the identity remains a dark blot on the record. Today, pilgrims continue to walk the cobblestone streets toward La Casa Azul, where the iron gates stand as a portal between life and legend. They photograph the bright blue facade, crowded with towering bougainvillea and marigolds. Inside, they move in hushed reverence past her bed, study the diaries on display, and trace the outlines of her prosthetic legs, each polished to a ghostly gleam. But as they emerge into the sunlit courtyard, the questions move with them. Did she stage her final exit as the culmination of a lifelong performance, choosing her moment to escape irreversible pain? Or did the systemic failures of medicine and record keeping conspire against her, turning an already weakened heart into a final victim of circumstance? The unanswered queries swirl like fallen petals around the rooms she once inhabited, ensuring that no visit ends with certainty, only a deeper curiosity and a renewed sense of awe.